It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. Now, I actually have a background in quantum physics, so it's going to help me a bit to understand the sort of level of understanding of this topic from the audience. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to read through these questions and then ask you to download an app. It's true or false, so not that hard, and then we'll put all of your marks up here for everybody to see. Let me give you a few minutes. I'm kidding. My background is in quantum physics. The reason I put up this slide is not only for my amusement at seeing the looks on people's faces, but to tell you these are all three true statements. Quantum mechanics powers the devices that we use daily, our smartphones, our iPads, our laptops. It is our most accurate theory of reality to date. You may know that to learn something, you need to interact with that system. And in quantum physics, that's the same, right? On a human level, we do understand that. We understand that when we interact and learn from someone, a connection is established, a correlation is established. And in fact, this is true all the way down to the level of fundamental particles. So I will get back to the relevance of that for what I'm going to tell you about today. Any good story starts in the beginning, and from the perspective of a physicist, that starts in the very beginning. So this is a picture of the cosmic microwave background. This is as far back as we can see. And that clumpiness you see there, that's early matter, mostly hydrogen, which was formed during the Big Bang. And I don't know if this makes you feel better or worse, but 10% of your body is around 14 billion years old, according to current scientific theory. Because as we look at the universe, we find no other process by which hydrogen is produced. Therefore, all of the water that constitutes more than half of your body contains those same atoms that were produced during the Big Bang. Now, talk about correlations. The universe is in you. You are in the universe since the beginning. Let's come a bit closer to home. This is the most highly resolved picture ever taken of the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way. As a South African, I'm particularly proud of this picture because it has been taken by the precursor array, which will eventually, in around 10 years, form the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope. This was just the test phase, and it's the most highly resolved image ever of these supernova remnants that are in the center of our galaxy. And it took these supernova events to form the rest of the periodic table, whether it's the oxygen or the carbon or the nitrogen, that form the rest of our bodies. So coming even closer to home, nothing interesting really happens without power. And when we are looking at life on a planet, that power would come from a sun. Our sun is a relative newcomer at 4.6 billion years old and hosts, of course, our beautiful home planet Earth. Now, there's several features of our home planet Earth that can be observed from space. The blue planet, right? We're mostly covered by oceans. Our liquid water is maintained in a liquid form because of our sun, because of our distance from that sun, and because of the size of our planet. We can even see life on Earth from space, photosynthesis, the lungs of our planet, the jungles in Central Africa and Southern America, the regulator of temperature on our planet, and also the first living organisms to have emerged. Around 4 billion years ago, we find evidence of bacterial photosynthesis. So if you were waiting for an answer of where we have come from, I'm sad to tell you that science has not yet figured this out, but perhaps the most interesting discovery we've made towards understanding where we come from is that all life on Earth shares this molecule in common, this double helical structure. And this is beautiful from the perspective of unity. So when we go back to the Big Bang and all the way through to the large-scale structures we see in the universe, and then we zoom back down to those very small-scale structures that constitute all known life on Earth, we find this unity. However, from the perspective of scientifically trying to understand what life is, what kind of environments can support life, and indeed whether life may exist elsewhere, we are left with this single data point, life on Earth, right? One big family. So that leads me to the next point, which is where are we going? And it goes without saying that this year we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing. But is this really a celebration? Or a rapid call to action? Because for those of us who were not around in the late 60s and 70s, does this mean we've missed it? For those brave astronauts who first stepped on the moon. Does this mean they will not get to see the return to the moon? This may be the case because these Apollo astronauts are now, of course, in their 80s and 90s after this grandest adventure that humans have ever embarked upon. But there is another 50th anniversary that's coming up. And if we are to be called to rapid action, perhaps this is something we can celebrate in a few years' time, which will be the 50th anniversary of the first time that we have landed technology on the surface of Mars. Most people perhaps don't realize that we have had the capability to land technology on Mars since 1976. So what can we look forward to perhaps celebrating in the next few years running up to this 50th anniversary? Now, a lot of people around the world got excited about the announcement by the Mars One project back in 2013, and it was a call for volunteers for this project. So for me, my world froze, realizing that my childhood dream of exploring other worlds may be possible and may be happening soon. So 200,000 of us from all around the world applied. 100 potential astronauts were shortlisted, myself and 99 other super inspiring, maybe a little bit crazy, but highly qualified individuals from all corners of the world. However, getting to Mars may have been demonstrated, but surviving there is not going to be easy. These are the kinds of conditions we are looking at on the surface of Mars. So for a South African, -60 might sound extremely cold, but of course there are populations on Earth who do survive through winters, even with a bare kind of infrastructure of technology through temperatures like this. So perhaps this is not the worst problem. The atmosphere is not breathable at 95% carbon dioxide, but perhaps the pressure is the most dire feature of the atmosphere, because even if there were oxygen in an atmosphere on Mars, at this pressure we would not be able to breathe it. So the iron oxide on the surface could certainly form a resource for technologies like 3D printing, and perhaps the funnest part about Mars would be the gravity, which is 38% of Earth, and if you can jump this high on Earth, that means you could jump 3 times as high on Mars, etc. But basically, we're living in this era of rapid technological development. And what is more imperative now than ever is to have a vision for the future. Otherwise, we risk the turmoil of this fast-paced development leading us to arrive at a place in the future that we had not predicted or hoped for. So if we have this vision of the future, we certainly need to take knowledge and lessons from the past. And I hope I've had the opportunity to talk a bit about where we've come from and this vision. But what I've left out is the most important part, and that is, what are the key steps that we are taking now, having learned from the past, having our vision for the future, in order to achieve this dream? So in February this year, the Mars One project announced bankruptcy. And for a startup, attempting to go where no humans have gone before, in fact, attempting a project that Earth has been evolving towards, arguably, for 4.5 billion years, right? We are the first organisms on Earth to have evolved the technological capability to dream that such a thing is possible. And perhaps if I could state at this point, the largest achievements of the Mars One project, from my perspective, are that Lisa Simpson volunteered to go to Mars on The Simpsons. Sheldon Cooper volunteered to go to Mars on The Big Bang Theory. Cartman volunteered to go to Mars with the Mars One project, all of these characters in South Park. And these are 3 of my all-time favorite TV shows. And to see the project of which in which I am involved, given a direct mention in these TV shows, was for me a fantastic reward. But what are the next steps? A lot of people said, oh dear, now that the Mars One project is not happening anymore, what are you going to do with your life on Earth? However, a startup not managing yet to raise the capital to leave the planet is certainly no prevention towards that grand dream that we have been arguably working towards through all the history of life on Earth, to develop the capability to explore worlds just beyond ours. So, as a South African, without around $100 billion or so, which could be the price tag on the first mission to Mars, what do I do? And I partly was inspired by the endurance documentary of the Shackleton voyage to Antarctica. This was a call for volunteers that appeared apparently in the newspaper in 1913. Quite uncanny that 100 years later, the call for volunteers for the Mars One project came out in 2013, and I think you can see parallels. Of course, we can scratch out men because we all know women are far more intelligent and far more resilient. And if you're going to send a mission to another planet, that's the team you would want to select. I joke. Diversity, as we have heard and as we know, is the key for a team, particularly in environments where unforeseen challenges will arise. So I'm sure you've had a chance to read through the characteristics of this mission, and you'll probably agree that this is remarkably similar to the call for volunteers for the Mars project. But the destination of this voyage was, in fact, the inspiration for me. So in May this year, I left the corporate world, quite happily, I might add, to establish a movement called Proudly Human. And our first project or expedition is an overwinter off-world settlement simulation experiment to Antarctica. From where I live in Cape Town, I can almost see the departure points of where the South African boat departs each year. So this was my inspiration as a South African about what I can do towards generating not only the capability, but in terms of the research, in terms of the technology, and in terms of an understanding of the kinds of teams that may be successful doing a mission to Mars. So why Antarctica? Well, the conditions on the surface, temperature-wise, we can see do have some parallels with Mars, very cold, in other words. This is one of the pods in the base where we will stay, and excitingly, I'm off there next week for a location recce. That's the White Desert Camp. So it looks quite pleasant now. This is obviously in summer, as I will see it next week. In winter, I guess the photos don't come out so well because it is dark. There are blizzards. Wind speeds can go up over 300 kilometers per hour. And this is really the most isolated place on Earth. Even the space station or even the moon are not analogs for the kind of isolation that the first crewed missions to Mars will experience. Because during the winter in Antarctica for 4 to 5 months, you cannot leave. No plane, no ship can arrive to help or to rescue anyone. So you're really on your own for the duration of the winter. And in that way, it's a unique location on Earth for the psychological aspects of designing a team and preparing technology and research to really understand how that team functions. So we're not going to stop there. The winter of 2021, we will spend in Antarctica with the knowledge I gain going next week in terms of the infrastructure that exists and how we will augment it, because no one has lived in the White Desert Camp over winter before. But subsequently, we'll go to the desert, the hottest place on Earth, why not? The Lut Desert in Iran, plus 70 degrees is a potential place where we will spend the next season. And a submarine, spending almost a year in a very confined area underwater is probably the closest analog we can get to long-duration spaceflight. And by the time we've repeated several of these missions, we hope to have generated a lot of data, a lot of knowledge, a lot of research, tested a lot of technologies, and more importantly, understood what kind of individuals make up what kind of teams, and how can we augment a community spirit within these teams, not in spite of, but perhaps inspired by the extreme environments in which they are required to live and work. Happily, we hope. So in case you're wondering what is the feasibility of this all, this is a launch by SpaceX, and I'll have to add South African-born Elon Musk's company, SpaceX. This was a launch back in February of 2018. SpaceX has achieved several milestones since then, but this is particularly important for the mission to Mars because this was a successful test of launching a cargo beyond Mars. So this is the cargo you're looking at. That is not Elon Musk in the car, of course, but that is his cherry red Tesla Roadster, now currently in orbit around the sun beyond Mars. So mission accomplished in terms of the launch. What you're going to see in a second is the other amazing feat and achievement that SpaceX performed during this first ever successful testing of the Falcon Heavy, currently the most powerful rocket in operation. In a moment, you're going to see the 2 boosters returning back to Earth in a feat that many said was impossible. In fact, just months before, it was publicly stated this moment would be impossible. Absolute engineering poetry, perfectly synchronized, retrieved back on Earth for minor repairs, to be reused, and really ushering us into a new era of space exploration where we can reduce the costs of launch. So, as my mom has pointed out, my talk hasn't changed a lot because I'm always focusing on the kinds of technologies that we'll need to live on Mars. And these are, what kind of power systems are we going to have? Renewable, of course. How will we generate clean air and clean water and nutritious food for the people living in these extreme environments? Of course, city life and crops and the location of the settlement, the structures in which people live will be part of it. And that's me on the right back in 1997. That was my school project, not robotics or 3D printing that we see amazingly coming out of high school projects nowadays. This was the 90s, so paper mache. But the spirit was there, and I think in this brief time that I've had to discuss this dream with you, I hope you understand that it's not simply my journey to Mars to which we are working. Whether you're in a refugee camp, or an informal settlement, or an overpopulated city, or a moon base, or a Mars base, the requirements for cheap, robust, efficient technologies to be locally sustainable, using renewable energy, managing wastewater efficiently, growing nutritious food, and of course communication systems for the people living in that community are the basic requirements towards creating community spirit wherever we are. So I haven't had a chance to understand what each of your dreams are today. I don't know if you photoshopped your face onto Elon Musk's car, but what I do know for sure is that we all dream. And I also know for sure that each of our dreams has a role to play, and in fact has to play a role, because it is only through the collaboration of all 7, 8 billion of us and counting that we will have any hope, and I believe it is possible, when we allow ourselves to dream, when we believe in our dreams, and more importantly, when we take active steps towards achieving those dreams, that it becomes possible to create a proudly human future, whatever planet we're on. Thank you very much.